Hello guys, welcome to my channel. I hope everything's okay in your life. In this video you will find an updated version of series I prepared in the previous years. You're in luck for listening to the explanation because I felt the need to quickly discuss the content of the video. Each video will feature an interview with a class master about either the Succession or Awakening versions of a class. All videos, including the older ones, will be available in the playlist you see on the screen. You can find the link of the playlist in the pinned comment section. The purpose of this video series is to help you understand the basic role of the class within the game. I must clarify that it is not a deeply detailed guide. You will watch an interview in a conversational style aimed at answering the fundamental questions of those interested in playing a class. The class masters featured are experienced players who have dedicated thousands of hours to their class and to the Black Desert Online. You may recognize some and not the others, but unfamiliarity does not make them bad players. All the class masters mentioned have proven themselves in Black Desert Online world. Please be respectful when sharing your thoughts. Enjoy watching. Hello guys, welcome. Today's guest is Choice. Welcome Choice, how are you?
I'm doing very good. Thank you for having me today.
You all know who is Choice. If you don't know, Choice is here for Berserker. We mostly talk about Succession Berserker, but he's playing Berserker from the beginning of the game. He's true Berserker classmaster, and we will talk about overall Berserker. May you please introduce yourself? Who are you? Where are you from? Which server are you playing at?
Yeah, so my name is Choice. I am from Canada and I'm playing on the North American server. I do have a European account as well, but I primarily play in NA.
Thank you. How did you find out the BDO and what caught your interest to stay in BDO?
So BDO actually released on Steam back in 2017, and there was like a big notice that popped up, and one of my friends saw it at the time, and we thought, hey, why don't we try a new game? So I started playing with a group of people around Steam launch, and what kind of kept me in the game is that I really like the atmosphere of the game, the combat system, and I just genuinely like long-term progressionary games. I'm not one to like play round-based games. I like how my work from one year to the next shows.
Yeah, whenever we talk with the other class masters, we have the common answer is combat. I mean, the combat is this game completely different and unique. They all agree.
Yeah, I think it's just the tab targeting thing. There's so many games that have tab targeting, but like directing your camera and connecting abilities with just like kind of target assist is so much more like you just have so much more control over your character and your positioning is so much better.
Exactly. Have you ever taken a break from playing BDO? If so, what motivated you to come back?
So I haven't really taken any like true breaks from Black Desert. I've at a minimum I've always kind of had my character AFKing, working on things. The longest time maybe is 3 months, and that's because I had a really difficult university like semester. But other than that, I mean, I've always kind of AFK'd and always tried my best to be active in the game.
Thank you. How long have you been playing the class you're currently playing? I mean, the Berserker. Have you tried any other classes?
Yeah, so I actually started BDO like back in 2017 and I started on a Berserker. So I've never actually truly re-rolled. It's always been my main class. But ever since the tagging system did come out and you could play more classes, I tagged Striker for a long time. I tagged Lawn and then I also tagged Wusa for a long time. But I've also played like a whole bunch of other random classes for maybe a couple weeks at a time.
Like all of the veteran players, I guess.
Yeah.
What sets the class you play apart from the other classes? Why Berserker? What is special thing in Berserker?
So back before like successions ever existed, Awakening was like one of the classes that I really enjoyed that it had a mixture of both ranged capability and melee capability. It's like a hybridized playstyle that you didn't find in any other class because most classes are either fully ranged or they're fully melee. And so I really like that aspect of it because things like Node Wars, when they say drop range damage or push in, you can do both, whereas some classes you're just kind of standing around not knowing what to do. And then when Succession came out, what I liked about Berserker is that it's like generally a pretty tanky class compared to most. You have a lot of passives and HP pool, and you have a lot of access to like passive healing that now gives percent HP over time. It's a class that has 2 grabs, which is rather uncommon, and because you can like extend those grabs, it also makes it really good for like setting up kills and working with a team and in smaller scale PvP. So I like that.
Right, another question. Is your class evasion or damage reduction or both playable and why?
Berserker is traditionally only damage reduction unless you're going to build like full DP, 500 plus DP with very low AP. That's just due to evasion scaling. That evasion may become better, but Berserker actually has the lowest base evasion rate of like any class, and it has no evasion passives. So ultimately DR is preferred, but because evasion scaling is so strong and there's not really a lot of good DR DP accessories, you will find that in a full DP build evasion will be a little better.
Okay. What is your current gear score? Do you rush your gear progress or you just take it easy type of guy?
So my highest gear score combination of items can go up to 770, but I'm typically like around 764 in most common builds that I run in PvP. But I am very gear progression oriented. I try my best to have the top tier gear that I can, and even right now I'm like preparing for future progression with Deboreka rings and Fallen God weapons and stuff. So pretty gear oriented. Yes, I do rush it.
Thank you. Is your class newbie friendly? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate its difficulty? You can separate it as Succession and Awakening if you want.
Yeah, so Succession Zerker is pretty easy in terms of playstyle for any class. It has very low APM, it has a lot of super armor, so it's very forgiving in your positioning, and being tankier also makes it harder to mess up your positioning because you don't just kind of go in and immediately die. So yeah, I do think Succession's pretty easy. Awakening, though, it is not at all newbie friendly. You have a lot of protection gaps, you have a lot of frontal guards. There's a lot of key presses to your combos. You're switching between awakening and pre-awakening like every time you go for a grab. There's also mouse movement, which is another extremely uncommon skill thing required, particularly for awakening berserker. That's super influential in your playstyle, and it just the class is certainly 10 in terms of difficulty in awakening, and maybe like a 2 on succession in terms of difficulty starting out.
Thank you. So we talk in general the basic things of the Berserker. Let's dive in. We are curious about your thoughts on the PvE situation of the class you're playing. Could you provide us with detailed information separately for early, mid, and end game?
Yeah, so in the early game, both classes are very fast in PvE. Awakening will continue just to be generally a lot higher effort than Succession because Succession is just incredibly low effort. Like there's a combo you can hold down 5 buttons and just move your mouse to direct your camera, and you can grind squishy mobs in one shot. But both classes are fully capable of outpacing the pickup speed of even the best pets, so they're very good in the early game. Mid game wise, you're going to find that Awakening is going to start to outperform Succession by up to even about 10% more. In some spots maybe higher, but all in all, Succession kind of is a slower PvE class, not due to anything other than just the way the game is designed and just the way that the percentage modifiers are in the skills. It's not like it lacks anything particularly other than just Awakening has better damage, and that's true all the way up into the end game. So about 10% better you'll find on Awakening compared to Succession, but a lot more effort to play an Awakening.
I'm really happy about the Awakening Berserker. Finally, after the reworks, they just did very good things about Awakening Berserker. You know, the first reworks they tried to, like 3-4 years ago, they tried to do all the Awakening kits independent from the pre-awakening, but for some classes like Valkyrie Warrior, all type of classes, they were still using the pre-awakening kit to get some of the buffs. But I'm really happy that they added some, for example, self AP buff to SLMB on Awakening Berserker. On the other hand, the new skill, the Flame Pummel or something,
Yeah.
on that one, an accuracy buff, and they cancel each other, pretty good skills. And even I'm thinking that Awakening Berserker is getting better and better after patches, especially for the combo in PvE. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Those adding in the AP buff on like blasting and just the not having to go into pre-awakening to do Frenzy Destroyer has made the PvE what it is today. You don't at all have to go into your pre-awakening during PvE, whereas you used to have to, and that's pretty much created the situation that we're in where Awakening is a little bit better than Succession. But overall, the classes are pretty decently in the middle of performance in PvE. I wouldn't say that either of them are blatantly weak or broken. I think that if you're comparing them to a broken class like Succession Witch or an incredibly weak class like Succession Nova, then it can look either really bad or good in comparison. But they're very mid-tier in terms of the overall placing of the tier list in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I understand totally what you're saying. So much effort and getting average, sometimes above average, sometimes below average results is not making the class good. But at least some of the classes right now, they are feeling okay compared to before.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So let's talk about PvP. We are curious about your thoughts on the PvP situation of the class you're currently playing. Could you provide us with the detailed information separately for 1v1, 1vx, AOS, 5v5, Guild League, Node, Siege, War of the Roses?
So for the 1v1, Succession Zerker is quite an easy class to play in 1v1. It's really strong in the hands of pretty much anybody. It has really, really good evasion shred if you're fighting a target that has a lot of evasion. It has very good ability to catch other classes with lots of protected CCs. You don't have to ever do anything that's unprotected other than go for a grab. It does rely quite a bit on frontal guard CCs while being melee distance, and that can leave it open to getting countered. But if you are tanky enough where someone struggles to one combo you, due to that passive HP regeneration and stuff like that, it can almost feel like an unbeatable class in 1v1s. And then for Awakening, the player is like the most important thing for Awakening. It can be incredibly strong or incredibly weak purely based on your skill. There's a lot of gaps in protections. You constantly have to space yourself out from the enemy, and there's a lot of fast classes in BDO right now. It's very easy to get CC'd. You're using a lot of frontal guards, but you do have the added benefit of playing super aggressively or defensively with 3 grabs. And so that's what makes it super S++ tier or F- tier, depending entirely on the player, is that if you can space correctly and you know your matchup well, having those 3 grabs creates an incredible amount of pressure, and fishing for range CCs with the Buster makes it also something that a lot of classes don't expect, because usually when you're spaced out, people do unprotected things or they have cooldowns that they need to try to manage. So it's a super polarizing playstyle in Awakening. And then for like 1vxing, I wouldn't say that either spec is very known for its 1vxing. Like most of the time, if you're gonna 1vx on Succession, it's because you're more geared than your opponents. Awakening would have more outplay potential, but due to all the gaps and the positioning, it makes it a lot tougher when there's so many classes that have just super armor CC rotations, and now you have 2 classes or more that you're fighting. But you can fish for range CCs and follow up on that. So I'd say Awakening is a little bit better at 1vxing, but not known for it necessarily. And in terms of like small scale though, Arena Solaire, both classes can do very, very well in AOS. A Novice Zerker on Succession will climb a bit further than Awakening, but I think the potential of Awakening is higher because you have higher damage in AOS. You also have more influence on the fight, having an extra grab. But both classes here in North America have reached Solar Incarnate in North America, and Awakening, though, had a higher win rate by a few percent, so I'd say that's why it's got a little bit more of a potential. Right around the time of 5v5, though, that's where both classes start to become quite equal. So Awakening can be like a great way to fish for CCs from range and follow up on teammates, and Succession can be a great engage, and you're typically going to be tanky enough where you can do still extension grabs in a 5v5. So they're pretty equal in their impact, but a little different in how they impact. When you start getting up into bigger scale fights, though, like Guild League and stuff like that, so Guild League Succession can't really survive grabbing anyone anymore because there's just too many players and you'll die. And this is where Awakening starts to become a little bit more impactful because you can play a lot safer with range, damage, and CC. Succession starts to be able to barely survive in the game mode when jumping in. A lot of that has to do with Guild League is a very handcrafted composition for many guilds in the upper end, so there's lots of Draconias and Wusas and Magus, and just super high damage that makes it really hard to play like a melee class like Succession. So that's where Awakening starts to become a bit better. And then when we get into like true large scale, like War of the Roses and Node Wars and Siege, the Ball Be All fights, Awakening can actually be a top fragging class. Like the hybrid nature of the class being ranged and melee lets it be very influential in its positioning. You can take advantage of choke points, you can take advantage of high ground, you can castle defense. It's got everything in its kit in order to be very, very good, but it's also a class you'll either completely fail at or completely dominate at over time. Because of having very little protection, it's so hard to go in and drop some frontal guard skills or some skills that have a gap in them and then immediately get CC'd because you're positioned incorrectly or you were a little bit too aggressive. So it's super polarizing. Succession, on the other hand, for large scale, most Succession Zerkers, you can SA rotate, but it is so common to just go negative in large scale PvP as a Succession Zerker. There's very few that go positive. Realistically, what it comes down to is due to the high damage meta, you hardly can get off an ability if you jump too far in, and you're kind of just a martyr for your guild. You're going in, you're going for an ult, you're going for CCs initially, and hopefully your team can follow up. If your team is following up, though, Succession Zerker can be really strong because you can catch people off guard. You are going in and setting up the plays. You're not really taking advantage of other classes that are setting up the plays. So if you like more of that aggressive go in and cause the frenzy, then that's where Succession comes in. But I would definitely say that Awakening is starting to become far more in the meta as the damage increases in this game over and over again here in large scale PvP.
Thank you. Is there a significant strong aspect of the class you're playing or the weakness? What is the strongest thing and the weakest thing in your eyes about Berserker?
So the strongest thing about Succession Zerker is that it has really large AoE and lots of good super armor rotation, and it has an absolutely unmatched amount of evasion shred in Succession for like a 1v1 combo. The tackling rock skill has like a 25% accuracy rate. You've got a minus 12% melee evasion rate. You got a plus 15% accuracy rate that you can apply to yourself before your combo. And not only that, but the tackling rock is also an air attack, so it's very, very strong. The weakness is that it's purely a melee class, so that can cause some instant deaths in large scale, but for 1v1s, pretty limited weaknesses. Having the HP passive where it heals you over time and a big HP pool, you can be very, very strong. Another big strength is that we have the one of the only usable 200% in the game, so that's really nice for a large scale every 30 minutes. But yeah, it's a pretty fun experience going in and 200ing. For Awakening, the big strengths are that you have CC from ranged on a pretty low cooldown. You have the grab pressure of 3 grabs. You have access to 2 30% slows. combos, which you can put on add-ons and make them like 40%. And then if you play the class well, so it's hard to like play against a Zerker that knows the class well, because if you are far away from the Zerker, it's ranging you. If you're close to it, you have grab pressure. But the weakness again is that the sheer number of gaps in the class and the frontals that you rely on makes it pretty tough to, if you are pressuring that Awakening Zerker really, really hard, it will likely end up on the ground if it misses its grab. So it can be very coin flippy in that way, and you can run out of cooldowns when trying to kite on the class.
Thank you. Are there any classes that clearly dominate Berserker? And are there any classes that you can clearly dominate them? The counter matchups for you.
So classes that we dominate are anything that has pretty poor mobility. So the standard stuff like Awakening Witch, Awakening Wizard, Succession Nova, like anything that relies heavily on sitting in block, it can be really strong at. I'd say our number one like matchup that we completely counter would be an Awakening Nova. Awakening Nova doesn't have the DPS to kill you after its grab, and the fact that you can extend a grab after you catch the Nova can pretty much mitigate any random CCs you're going to get from Axion. So overall, that's a free win. And then for the classes that it's really hard for us to fight, it's the same on Succession and Awakening. Sorkin, Ranger, and Tamer, those are really hard fights because they have lots of iframes, really quick CC follow-up, and it makes it super common to catch a Berserker going for a grab against these classes because they are so protected. You have to kind of go for that grab, and Zerker actually has one of the longest grab fail animations. If you go for a grab and the player iframes, it does a really nasty, like around 1 second where you're completely unprotected. So it can cause a lot of situations where Sorks, Rangers, and Tamers just can dominate us by fishing for that grab, waiting for it to happen, iframing it, and then CCing us afterwards.
Thank you. Another question. Is there a mechanic or skill in your skill kit that you would like to be buffed or nerfed?
Yeah, so Succession Zerker, I mentioned Tackling Rock, and that skill is just not balanced. Like, it's too much damage in a combo. That one frame, pre-buffing yourself and using Tackling Rock when someone's in the air is half of their HP pool in an instant. And I think that it's way too powerful. In general, I do think, though, that Succession Zerker has a pretty old kit. It's got very long cooldowns. Like, our shift Q has a 45-second timer, which is attached to our 100%. And I think that was in order to balance the 100% way back when, but it still has a 45-second timer for Succession, which we use that skill all the time. And our minimum timers for our engage is like anywhere from 13 to 20 seconds. And we don't have a lot of skills that we really use, all in all, like all things considered. So most modern classes have like more 8 to 9 second timers, which makes Succession Zerker really hard to do any sort of damage trading in a 1v1. So if they did nerf that Tackling Rock damage, I'd like to see more damage brought to our maybe chip damage, like how we can, not in our combo, but like what we can do to whittle people down in a fight. But having all of our damage into one little gimmicky skill like Tackling Rock, I'd like to see it spread out a little bit better. And then for Awakening, mouse movement is like a really, really influential thing in the playstyle of Awakening. But the problem is that in the BDO servers, mouse movement creates all kinds of just, it looks so silly. Even on Succession, it looks silly. Just you don't know where the character is on your screen. It looks so bad. So I'd like to see mouse movement be not as required and maybe even removed, as long as they can provide a solution where we can direct what we want our skills to do with the camera, or something that can cause us to not jump as far as we would like to jump and still get the explosion out of Predatory Hunt on Succession, for example. But yeah, less reliance on the mouse movement is what I think needs to be buffed on both classes for the greater of everyone around that doesn't want to see laggy, desyncy combat.
Okay. Actually, I want some kind of stamina nerf on a Lava Piercer. It's so irritating when you are just sprinting and your stamina is refreshing itself. Maybe I don't know. It feels weird. What do you think?
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, the stamina on Zerker is a point of contention. It actually got nerfed barely in an animation change that they didn't mention in the patch note recently, like within the last few months. But overall, yeah, Zerker does have an incredible amount of stamina. It is pretty odd that you can regenerate stamina in a Lava Piercer, but all in all, I don't really know what they can do to help that out. Like if I have played a lot of other classes that have stamina issues, but they have so much more strength See, the thing is, like, so I have a Draconia tagged right now, and it has stamina problems, and it's so weird when you run out of stamina. But I also can respect that, hey, it is one of those classes that has very modern 8 to 9 second skills and a lot of ability to do stuff even when, like, far more often than Succession Zerker. So Zerker has always been limited by its cooldowns and not limited by its stamina, whereas most other classes are limited by their stamina and not their cooldowns. So it's almost like the same thing. And if you ended up nerfing Zerker's stamina and we still have really long cooldowns, I'm not sure that it's going to really make as big of a difference as people think, because Zerker does have to disengage to get cooldowns back a lot of the time. So I don't know if it's going to make as big of a difference as people think it will in terms of our overall effectiveness in any type of content, but it is something that people complain about a lot.
Thank you. So, can we get a brief summary of the good and bad things of Berserker? What Berserker can offer me? Let's say that I'm an average player. I want to take Berserker. What should I expect from Berserker?
Yeah, so Awakening offers that playstyle that you're not going to find on any other class. It's got the range and melee style, but it also has that really high skill cap. So what's cool about it for an average player is that you can grow with this class. It's not something that you're going to feel like you are hopeless in fighting this other player, or you're hopeless in this particular PvP activity. You're always going to be able to improve and get better and make the class work in anything that you want to do. It's very well-rounded. Succession, it offers a much more friendly introduction to your class. You can start becoming very strong in it much quicker, but your potential is rather limited compared to Awakening. But it offers like just an unmatched feel and play style of being the aggressor rather than someone that's kiting a lot. Awakening tends to kite a lot, where Succession, you just kind of hold W and go towards your opponent a lot of the time. So it's very two extreme different play styles, and it's good depending on what you enjoy, I guess.
Thank you. So let's talk about game itself. What are your thoughts on BDO current situation from past until now?
Yeah, so BDO has changed a lot over the last like 7 years that I've played it. I think that the game used to revolve a lot more around guild dramas and PvP, and people would grind to get more gear in order to be a part of like PvP, because it was a lot more uncapped PvP. It was the only thing that there was uncapped PvP. But as the game has transitioned, now that you can interact in pretty much any PvP scenario in a capped gear setting, it's made the gearing process a lot less influential in terms of enjoyment of PvP. So I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, but it has made PvE far more, like, the outcome of the PvE is not quite as important, and so a lot more people are just enjoying the progressionary aspect of the game and the challenge of getting more gear, not because of necessarily what it does for you in PvP, but because what it may unlock for you in PvE. I do think, though, that I wish that there was, if we are switching to more of like a PvE enjoyment type of game rather than using PvE as a means to get gear for PvP, there really needs to be a lot more interesting PvE. I do like the boss blitzing. I do like the Ataraxian dungeon. I would love to see more of that type of difficult PvE. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be like group content necessarily, but something that makes PvE more challenging and interesting. Like I really liked Altar of Blood, stuff like that. Like more party mode, more like sand. I'm not sure the word I'm looking for exactly, but some type of like PvE that has an objective and not just running around in a circle, you know, like something that has some active thought put into PvE if we're not making PvE just getting gear. So that's kind of the main differences I feel over time that BDO's changed, and how I kind of hope it may change future.
Thank you. So what do you think PA Company does well and also does bad about the updates? If you were in charge, let's say that for tomorrow, you will be the new Mr. J. For the first thing, what would you like to add and remove?
Yeah, so I think that PA does class design really well. Like the atmosphere of the game and just the overall vibrance of the world, very, very good. But I also think that there is a pretty big lack in variety of content for progression. So this sort of stems into what I was saying in the last question, but it is pretty hard to progress your gear in BDO without defaulting to just a few activities. Everybody kind of knows that, hey, you want to make money life skilling, you can hunt and cook. You want to make money as a PvEer, you just go grind. But there's not a lot of repeatable activities that you can do that are more unique than those activities that's going to give you general progression of your account. So boss splits, node wars, and dungeons, those are decent activities for money, but they're also time gated. And PvP generally has no progressionary system at all in terms of ways to earn money and progress your gear. So due to these limited ways to progress gear, in my perfect world, and something that I would work towards as a company, is I would try to work towards an hour of effort in the game should equal an hour's worth of results. If you want to put in an hour of active gathering, I would hope that that would make similar money to actively PvEing. And I would also hope that an active hour of PvP would also result in an active amount, or like a similar amount of money as both of those other things. So I think that just the lack of variety that is not time gated, because even though there is a lot of variety in BDO, you'll hit that time gate and then you'll have to default back to the one of those two activities, either grinding or hunting. It's like it's such a two-road street that you just can't deviate from if you want to play more than an hour or two a day. So I would love to see more of that long-term variety of ways to earn money through other things like Locky Arrows even, right? Like those used to be relevant, now they're no longer relevant, but it was something that was a little bit more interesting and still active and still made money. But it's just over time we lose those types of interesting activities that we otherwise could have done, and they just overall they just become irrelevant over time, and now we're stuck grinding and hunting. So that's what I would work towards.
Thank you. What advice would you like to give to newbies, returnees, and the other players in the game?
So the advice is that BDO in its current state is super sandboxy. There is that lack of variety and content in terms of like the pursuit of gear, but it is really healthy that you find things that you enjoy doing in BDO that don't necessarily correlate to money earned. As long as BDO stays the way that it is, then you kind of have to appreciate the things there are to do in BDO that do not revolve around that almighty gear score and being efficient in obtaining items at all times. A lot of people burn themselves out thinking that, oh, I need to get this gear score, but going and grinding for ecology or grinding for knowledge or grinding for treasure items or going for certain life skilling levels and goals, all of these activities in BDO feel quite different than just pursuing gear. And it's so common that people will burn themselves out thinking I always need to go for money. And that's a large reason why I haven't taken long breaks from Black Desert, is anytime I've kind of ran into that wall in the pursuit of gear, deviating to another separate activity can be very refreshing and make it where you're not going to burn yourself out.
Thank you. We are reaching the end of the interview. Is there anything else you would like to add before we finish?
No, not really. I mean, I think we've covered it all. I really appreciate you for having me. I appreciate all the work that you do in making these interviews and the guides. So just, yeah, thanks for involving me.
I want to thank you, Choice. You just came here, you shared your thoughts. We talk about Berserker, we talk about game itself. I'm appreciated. Probably you guys know Choice, but if you do not know Choice social links right now in the screen. Go check his Twitch, go check his YouTube. You will find tons of good and valuable informations. Especially in Twitch, the content is priceless. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alright guys, do not forget, BDO is just a game. Have a nice game.